very much, Monica. Thank you very much, Frank and Jen. We truly appreciate your presentation. I think we will have some extra time now for Q&A. Again, you can always type in your questions. Alternatively, you can also ask the question, but you have to, everyone else have to mute their speakers to enable us get a clearer audio. We have a couple of questions here. Some of them, like I said before, some of them have been answered. So you can always look at what we have here, in terms of the questions and the answers that have been provided. I have just one more question I have here, just quickly, by Josh. Josh is asking, how do we connect foundations and corporations that have mainly profit motives? In terms of, this question will be for Monica. How do we connect the foundations that are out there and corporations who probably can fund them, but such corporations have mainly profit motives, in essence, not necessarily, I believe, the protection of the environment?
Okay, well, that is a very good question. And one of the things that I've been doing is liaising with sustainability directors of major corporations. And in particular, Maureen Klein, who is the Director of Public Affairs and Sustainability at Pirelli Tire Company, said that what she's facing, and this is where probably you need to start a dialogue with, she said, within a company, it's impossible to implement an environmental strategy by relegating the task to one department working in a silo. And what she's calling on is that she needs employees who see their company, their operations as a breathing, living system. And so if you communicate with them and you start your dialogue with them, and many of them, for instance, one lady who works for a mega resort company, she said, to fulfill my mission, I need people who view our mega resorts as living, breathing systems and can analyze data, manage projects, and communicate to different audiences in this way. So they are the people who are actually changing the game within their profit-driven company. And they're saying if they go through that lens, they can actually organize the data to convince their shareholders and their company managers to move in this direction. So for the foundation to link with them and them to link with the foundation is really how we need to drive this discussion.
You know, Monica, there's one other point that's, I think, is aligned here, is that the fastest parts of our U.S. economy that from a jobs perspective are the renewable energy economies. Wind technicians, solar installers, anybody in the solar industry, anybody in the wind industry, energy efficiency, all key parts of the solution on the low carbon economy side. And there are companies that are making sizable investments there, but they're struggling to get quality employees who have the skills and capabilities that are needed right now. And if we're going to meet our carbon targets in time, based on what the science says, then the amount of people that are going to have to work in these new emerging economies, and that's just those types. There are so many other parts of the energy system, whether it's farming, whether it's refrigeration. There are so many ways you can look at the full transformation. The workforce piece, and there are profit motives there, but there has to be a partnership, an intentional partnership between the businesses who are opening up these new economies and these new industries and these new business lines. They have to understand and connect with the education enterprise deeply and powerfully. And it's not just, a 2-year, certification degree, because career identification by research happens down at the 5th, 6th grade level. And so, that's why I highlighted sixth graders. It takes them 11 years to graduate with an undergraduate degree. It's 9 years with an associate's degree, 2-year, community college degree. 9 years is not a long lead time, but there is a very real education gap between what's coming out of schools and education systems and what is the new economy on perhaps the most important issue we face. And so, there has to be a bridge between these businesses and companies who are trying to make, profit and a business work without destroying the planet in the process. And there's numbers and numbers of those kinds of businesses. And so I think that's just one. Now, on the resilient side, this is going to be a very large workforce enterprise as well. But our hands are not very clearly around it yet. There has to be more identification. We know environmental engineers are going to be redesigning the coastlines of the world so that they are resilient to sea level rise. That's just one threat. There are so many other ones, but what are the other jobs that come with that? Designers, planners, financiers. So I'm just saying that there's a connection between business and education as it relates to this issue that is very powerful, but has to be thought through more sizably. In the near term, if we're going to invest smartly here, we have to have a better plan than we currently have. It's very potential at this point in time, but not clear and actionable.
Well, and I need to add in on that, and I understand the businesses, they're motivated by profit, and so when they see this through the data that they're collecting, which is financial data, they'll see the benefits of that. And I also see, though, that the foundations need to step up to the plate. So many of us depend on foundations for funding to move forward, and I think that these foundations need to reassess where they're investing and the conditions that they're placing on what they're funding. And so from my perspective, I can see foundations being a powerful voice for change, and that they need to move to the plate and say, okay, what we have been doing isn't producing the urgent change we need, and we need to reassess that, and to come together with the businesses in a way that aligns with, if businesses are asking for employees to come in with better climate education through the lens of systems thinking, they need to work with the foundations to fund, for instance, those who are developing curriculum, and for them to work with the teachers to develop the curriculum in a way that's useful. So you're right, the plan is all over the place, and we're all looking at this from silos. And what I'm saying is we all have a role to play in moving this forward, and the urgent need is for us to be educated, as you're saying, in a way that we understand the results of our actions. So I see that there is a need, and it's going to have to start from those people who see the need and to develop that plan, and the ones who have the resources to do that.
Thank you very much. Okay, go ahead.
Just one quick, I think, Monica, in the near term, clarifying all the potential into an actionable multi-strategy plan towards these goals is something that I'm excited for moving forward in the near term. I think that it is high time and necessary right now. So that's kind of what I'm putting my time against, because a lot of these questions are about the strategies, different strategies for different groups, and how do we convene them. And I think that we in our community have been looking at the collective impact model as a powerful tool for how to shape and focus the strategies with a consortium of partners and collaborators. And that's kind of what I'm excited about right now. I think it's showing tremendous potential, but there's still too much fuzziness, and allude to that we're still fuzzy. And so I think that, the next year or so, it is high priority for us to focus to a much more actionable strategy that is coherent and leveraging that potential.
Yes, and I agree, and that's where we need to focus. How are we going to do all of this, and who are the partners that we need to bring to the table? And that's something that I'm working on it as well. And as you know, this is where we need to go urgently. So, and that's why I'm asking people for ideas on this. And everybody who's from different sectors are going to have to think of the role that they can play to move this together. And we're going to need everybody. Everybody has a role to play in this. And so they all need to feel a part of the solution as well. I agree with you, Frank.
Thank you very much for your responses. We still have time, but there's a question I saw here, I think from Josh. I guess Frank has given a very good feedback on, by sharing some links. But I also feel that you can respond verbally. And the question says, what are the best climate education strategies? Now, I guess, Jane, based on your experiences over the years, I think you can address this question, adding your experiences, verbally, so that some of us or some participants that are not that called in will also benefit hearing you. Thank you.
Sure. So just to echo kind of what Frank's response had been, last September, we gathered a number of kind of the best practices in climate change education, those organizations together for a meeting. And one of the links is the CSEP Alliance. So they have examples of different projects engaging youth and educators, as well a number of different audiences. So I think it's not clear to me if that link is available, that everyone can see that, but we can make sure that that's available. And Frank, I don't know if you want to add anything about the CSEP Alliance, which provides some really concrete examples of best practices in climate education strategies.
Sure. So just for the benefit of the community that is assembled here, in fact, actually, we have some leaders in that, and what that is on the webinar, Luca Ellis from one of those projects. But what they was back in 2008-9 in the United States, our Congress put a very significant level of funding for this priority, and competitive proposals came in. And, I think one of the really important tools is competitive grants for moving this forward, because the brilliance of our communities and the innovation, ingenuity, creativity, and effective designs that come from a lot of experimentation are really, really powerful. And so from 2008 till now, a lot of experiments went on in the United States of how to do climate change education, civic engagement, workforce development, both funded by federal grants, but also philanthropic and corporate investments. And so a variety of them was built forward, and the schematic I had with the audiences was our identification of these different audiences that but really bottom up because of some funding from the top. And what that allowed was experimentation. And so what we did back in September was lift up a lot of those deep projects that we knew about, identified them, carefully interviewed them, and organized them. And they're just a sampling. They're not the totality. They're just a sampling, because there's only so much time in order to lift them. And we found a lot of really powerful models. Where we struggle, and I think that comes back to Monica's point, is that grant-funded innovations are amazing, but what they struggle with is how to transition from innovation to scaled implementation. That's where we've struggled the most. And in order for that to happen, the money to make that happen, to serve our communities and our countries, is really where the investments just have not happened yet. So we have all these amazing possible models, but they're sitting kind of on the shelf. So Jen is an example of a very entrepreneurial, amazing program manager and leader who is, finding, various ways of finding funds to keep it going, but it's kind of tenuous. And Jen, I would test that, you spend a lot of time trying to find funds to grow and do the best work you can. An outsized amount of your time is spent on finding funds, and it's very, it's kind of like Tarzan jumping from rope to rope in the forest. You hope the next vine is there, and it's hard, and it's unduly hard. And so I think that we have a challenge to our community of what's the funding model for making this really, really important strategies on a variety of audiences work across, is how to make that happen, because we've got a lot of strategies, but what we don't have is the funding model that takes those strategies to scale.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Frank, that it is, the funding piece is really the hardest part. And there were a couple of questions that I want to make sure that we get back to. One was around like addressing policy holders, which Frank and I have been calling like the influentials. So, my background's not in policy, it's in education, but what we've seen working with youth is that they are actually able to address the policyholders. So particularly like in Sri Lanka and also in Liberia, those students that are galvanizing around climate change are able to make very clear requests to the policy decision makers, to those people that are making very important decisions about their environment. In particular, in, for instance, Sri Lanka, they've had the opportunity to meet with the head of the environment for the country, and they're actively working on, in the Ministry of Health, as well as their representatives to the UN COP conferences. So the students have made a lot of headway in working and reaching policyholders, I think, in a way that that adults haven't been able to do. Like, so that they really, those doors open. We've seen it here in New York State with our youth. They actually have been working to help shift our ski industry, which we really depend on for our winter, for our economy. Tourism dollars are our biggest segment of the economy here in Northern New York, to help the ski areas, the downhill ski areas, transition to 100% renewable energy within the next 10 years. And so that was a student-driven action where they were really vocal and, not necessarily from a lobbying standpoint, but just being at all the venues and talking to people and being out there and talking about the impacts of climate change on our winter economy, they were able to see that change. So we're seeing a direct connection from the youth in, actually working with those influentials directly and making a bigger difference. So I'm not sure if that completely answers the question that was posed, but I just wanted to address that.
So Jen, I just wanted to also add that young students, are very good because they tell compelling stories, and legislators and policymakers can better understand a story than just data. And it gets to their heart and it gets to their emotion, and they're driven to action and they're motivated by that student's story. I also want to say that if we're going to look at funding the work that you guys are doing, I think the first strategy needs to be developing metrics for education and its success. And I think that's why foundations have a hard time deciding to fund education, because it's very difficult for them to measure it. And I think that has to be the first strategy that we put in place. Otherwise, foundations will be very scared and very nervous to fund something that they can't see the results of. And if they can see the results, they'll look at this long-term and help organizations to develop a long-term strategy and support it.
Monica, one thing that I think as we get our act together and really lift up the potential is, of these major innovations that have happened in our country, and I'm very. And so, you know, some of these projects have been going on for a decade, and they live by performance measures. And I think, you know, one of the things I've been excited about doing is finding how you build those measures and lifting up and finding common measures, transferable measures, and, you know, ones that really, really connect with the priority, because there is a lot of measurability here. And, you know, just to reinforce that point you made about youth, there are a couple of key things that I've learned from youth in doing this work. One is their ability to handle the overwhelming nature of this problem and still lean forward into the solutions in spite of it is really, really important for older generations. Because a lot of older generations kind of get a little bit more despair here. And yet they're the ones who are going to be receiving the least impact in their lifetime. And the second piece is that there's an intergenerational dialogue power here that's really, really important, that when engaging youth with other audiences that are older than them, the older audiences, what we're seeing is, as a strategy, is that they reprioritize what's important and what needs to be what actions need to be taken, because they're thinking about legacy, future generations, handing future generations a better world than the one they received. Things of that nature only happen when you can intentionally connect through programs, multiple audiences across different generations. We have models that work at doing exactly this. Jen is one example. There are many others. But we cannot underestimate it, because one of the challenges that funders are concerned about when it comes to education is they see it as too slow. This is such an urgent issue. Well, that's not the case here. We've figured out ways to engage audiences at a young age, but then also connect that with older ages intentionally, carefully, and effectively, and perhaps are more effective than other strategies that don't have that element in them. So there's a multi-audience intersectionality that is very, very important and full of potential, but unharnessed as much as we can. So I think that and this is really coming from the youth, not from us, because this is what they want. They want to connect to, when we were there in COP21, they're there to represent their interests and make their position to people who are making decisions now, not preparing to be decision makers in the future. They're doing that too, but it's not just that. So anyway.
Thank you very much, guys. We really appreciate it. But I think we have 1 or 2 minutes. There's a question that's directed to Jane. I think Janice wants to know, she's asking if there have been any youth summits in Canada modeling your framework, real quickly.
Sure. We haven't had any youth summits yet in Canada that have used our framework. There is a program that did a youth summit a number of years ago out in British Columbia, and then there's another one that was done, I believe, outside of Toronto, but it's not using the framework that we created. But I would again be happy to reach out and connect you to those resources or to those people that run those 2 projects, or help you get a youth summit started in Canada. As I think I mentioned, we have a free toolkit online, and I'm so happy to help coach, mentor, partner with anyone that might be interested in working on a youth climate summit in their region.
Thank you very, very much. And we must thank you, 3 of you, for your presentation and this lively discussion. We just want to remind our participants that education for climate change is a means to an end. And we are going to do a whole lot more in this regard. This is just the beginning, but it has been a very wonderful and lively discussion. We have the contact info for all our three presenters and as well for Sustainability and Livelihood Research Organization on the last slide. And we are very, very free to get in touch with us because we have a lot of things coming on very, very soon. So we thank Frank, we thank Jane, we thank Monica for your time and for your inputs. And we hope very soon we will be getting back to you for additional input in this very important field. With this now, on behalf of the Sustainability and Livelihood Research Organization, we say thank you to every one of you, our participants from wherever you're calling in from. We really appreciate your participation, and we hope to contact you one more time very soon. Thank you, and this closes the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.